And what I wanted to talk about is the attitude that people have as far as being judgmental towards God and the Bible. Okay, they always, especially, they just make a separation between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they say, "Oh, the God of the Old Testament, He is so cruel, and He is so mean, and He is this and He is that." And as a rule, not as a rule, this is 100% the case, that almost 100% of these people have no idea about what is actually in the Bible. They do not know the history of the Bible. They do not understand, when God sent judgment, what was the reason for those judgments, okay? So today I wanted to discuss the topic of God as a judge, as the judge, as a matter of fact. You see, that is one of the responsibilities of God, is actually to be a judge and to judge evil in His creation. It is like, you think of it this way, right? We live in a society, and in a society, what do we have? We have to have laws. Whenever a group of people interacts with each other, we need certain rules and laws to govern behavior amongst each other, okay? You and I are not free to just go marching into our neighbor's house, start, destroying his property, start stealing his money, or doing worse things like, raping and pillaging, you name it, right? We have laws against that. And if somebody does that, then they are arrested and a trial is held. And the judge, who is the presiding judge, if the person is found guilty, they pass judgment upon him. Now, do you see people, when you have, let's say, a murderer or a child abuser or something like that being held on trial, are people out there saying, "Oh, this judge is so evil because he is going to pass judgment upon this person"? No, the person has done something evil and wicked, and therefore, as a society, we have determined that this type of behavior warrants judgment. And therefore, in God's creation, He has His laws. Okay, God is a great king. He has a kingdom. Whether you realize it or not, you live in His kingdom and you live under His laws. Now, therefore, when God sent judgment, okay, let's take, for example, the people that lived in this place called Canaan in the days of Moses, okay? Moses, when he brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, God promised them that, they would go to this place and call the land called Canaan, and they were going to displace the inhabitants there, okay? They were told that they would essentially, you might consider that to be a genocide in today's terminology, okay? That these people were essentially going to be wiped out and their land would be given to the children of Israel. And this is one of the reasons why people say, that the God of the Old Testament, the sun is really bright, and it's a bright fall day here, so this is a very shadowy, this video, but that's okay. Okay, so that is one of the reasons why people who have heard a little bit of this story, they don't understand the background. They don't have no idea about what the reality of that judgment was and why it came about. Oh, how can you worship a God that does this, that ordered women and even children and everything to be killed? Okay? First of all, let us look at the background here. In the case of these people of Canaan, what were they doing? Among other things, the list is rather long, but let us take a look at what they practiced ritually on a regular basis, which was infanticide. Okay? That is, they would take little children and they generally sacrificed them by burning them in a fire to this god that they worshipped called Moloch. Okay? That was just one of the things. The list of all the abominable activities, evil things, evil behaviors that these people were occupied in, that list is extensive, but you can read about it, especially in the book of Deuteronomy. Okay? Now, God had promised this land to Abraham. Abraham is the grandfather, you could say, of the children of Israel. And he was promised that he would get this land of the Canaanites. But he was also told that God would wait 400 years before he would fulfill that promise. Okay? So essentially, the Canaanites were given by God 400 years to correct course, to stop all these abominable activities, evil, wicked, and horrific beyond words of the things that they were doing, and to change. 400 years. Okay? Now, in our society, let's say a man commits a murder. Do we tell the man, okay, man, don't do this anymore, okay? And then next day he goes and commits 2 murders. Do we tell him, oh man, don't do this anymore, okay? And the week later he commits 4 murders. Do we tell him, oh man, don't do this anymore? Or the first time the man commits murder, he is arrested and imprisoned and put on trial, okay? Yet God gave these people 400 years. 400 years. Okay? Did they change? No. They got worse and worse and worse and worse. And that is history teaches us that. As society as a rule degenerates and it gets worse. Okay? Civilized people don't stay civilized for very long. And that is exactly the path we are on today. So now what is God supposed to do? Is he supposed to just keep ignoring it forever? God's word says that mercy rejoices against judgment. Okay, so God's mercy is always going to come first, that God will always seek to be merciful before he sends judgment. But there does come a time when time runs out, and then judgment must come, because if God did not do that, he would be negligent in his responsibilities, and he would not be qualified to hold the position of God, the judge of all creation. Okay, so judging people, judging evil is a very big responsibility for God. He does it very reluctantly, but eventually it does happen. Now, instead of trying to understand as to why. Now, another thing you need to look at is the perspective. If God is sitting up there, we are down here. Let's say it's like you are in a forest and you can't see the forest for the trees, okay? You have no idea of the big picture, but somebody's flying above in an airplane or a helicopter. He has a much better view. He can see what's going on down there much more clearly than you can, okay? So God sitting above, the vantage point, he is called the Most High. So he has the highest vantage point of all. If he sees it, what he is seeing, you and I are not seeing. Okay? So just because something may seem to be cruel or unjustified, it is not so. Because the Word of God tells us that God is going to be put on trial on the day of judgment. It is not just going to be the judgment of all people. God will willingly allow everybody to put him on trial, and yet he will be acquitted because he is a righteous judge. All his judgments, nobody will be able to prove the innocence that was judged, not a single person. All right? And therefore, seeing what he sees, the decisions that he makes, we just don't have that knowledge and information. So first of all, it is God's responsibility to be a judge. And secondly, what he sees, we do not see. So the wise thing, a wise person would say that yes, the Bible teaches that God is loving. One of his main characteristics is what's called loving kindness. He is loving and kind. He is merciful. He is gentle. He is love, the Bible tells us. He is light. Therefore, he is not going to involve himself in dark, evil activities. We are told that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. We are told that God cannot be tempted with evil. If people study their Bible and they believed in the God of the Bible, they would know who he is. It's only people that don't know him, that have only basing their opinion on hearsay. It's like, people all have an opinion about Donald Trump or Obama or somebody like that, what they see in the news. But I can assure you that their spouses and their families who are close to them will have a completely different opinion than yours because they know the person. Okay, so it is people who have heard of things about God that make these, comments, and they write comments. Oh, yeah, I cannot believe in a God, of the Old Testament or something like that. Well, the God of the Old Testament is Jesus Christ in the flesh, who loved us so much, that he gave his own life to save us. Okay, that's what God is. God is love. Love. Okay, but love also requires to be a judge, to judge those who are evil. And God doesn't judge, just like Adam and Eve. When they sinned against God in the Garden of Eden, God didn't judge them right away. He clothed them. He gave them everything that they required to still be fruitful and to multiply. That's how God is. I know that from my own personal experience, that, I do things wrong. I have done many things wrong, and I still do what we call sin. And I'm not, free from that. But I know how merciful my God has been to me, and he is towards everybody. Okay, so what I will suggest is that you rather, seek and you shall find. Seek to understand him, and then you will have the answers. But just because somebody, some so-called expert or whatever, got up on one of these TV channels or something like that and started, spouting, oh yeah, how can you worship, how can you believe in a God that does this and that? Well, first of all, your information is incorrect. And second of all, you are a fool because you have believed second-hand information rather than studying and researching for yourself, as I have. Therefore, I know my God. And therefore, I know whatever the people are saying is a lie, that they have no idea what's in the Bible. They have no idea about the history of the Bible. They have no idea about the character of God in the Bible. They don't. If they did, they would not say anything like that. And so I'll end this here and note that, yes, it is required of God that he should be a judge. And secondly, that his judgment is always tempered with his mercy, that, mercy comes first. Yet if people who are given an opportunity to repent, which means to change their way, if they absolutely do not, they insist on continuing in their evil, wicked ways, then judgment will come, and it should come. Okay, so let's say in our society, we have society, and are people free to go around murdering others, or just walking into somebody's house, robbing them, taking their kids and sacrificing them, cutting their hearts out or something like that? Even like, those are extremes. But even like, can people be free, just to, let's say you stopped at a stoplight like I'm driving, and somebody jumps into your car, robs you at gunpoint. Should that person be held accountable? Right? That's why we have laws. So if God has made this creation, it is his creation. See, society has been created by a group of people. Therefore, they determine that they have certain rights on how it should be conducted. And that's why we make laws. Okay, laws are useless unless there is a judge who is going to enforce those laws. So let's say you go into a courtroom and somebody had murdered another person. And people say, would this be a rational way of looking at it, is that if the judge passes sentence on the murderer, we start calling the judge evil. We say, oh, judge, you're evil. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be judging this murderer. But that is exactly what people do when it comes to God. Okay? You got to look at this here, that we don't have God's vantage point. Okay? When you're sitting above everything, you look at things differently. His point of view is different. And he is righteous, which means that any judgment that he has ever passed upon anybody, it is the right judgment. It is never wrong. He cannot be bribed. He cannot be bought. He cannot be, convinced to pass the wrong judgment upon anyone. Okay? And overall, people say, how can God let people suffer? Well, this is a teaching that I have done again and again and again and again. But people, some of them, most of them have not ever listened to it or heard it, so maybe they don't know. But the suffering of man is the suffering of God. God is in all his creation, whether it be a beast or it be a man. Anybody that suffers, that is in pain, whether it's physical pain or mental pain or any kind of pain, God is suffering through them. Okay, so God experiences all our pain and all our suffering. God knew that in this world, to serve his purposes, to teach us certain things, to make us into a certain kind of people, which are God kind of people. People that are identical to him in their person, in their character. We would need to go through this process of pain and suffering and death and, the most horrible things that we can imagine. Therefore, God did not just throw us into the cauldron and kept himself immune from it. What does the Bible tell us? In Isaiah, for example, that in our affliction, he was afflicted. So whatever we have suffered, he has suffered. Now just picture this here, okay? If you want to get a real understanding before you start condemning and judging God, that you might have suffered a few things in your life. We all have, okay? And you may have, some real painful experiences. But now just look at God. That God has himself suffered. He has experienced all of the pain that any person has ever suffered. All of it. Any person, since pain came into existence, God has suffered it all. Okay? Because that was the price that was necessary to be paid in order to make us creatures of conscience, to bring us the knowledge of good and evil, without which we cannot be creatures of conscience. And good and evil cannot be taught through a book. It has to be experienced. And the experience of evil brings pain with it. And God knew that. And therefore, from the slightest little pinprick to the pain of death, God himself suffered all of that. And that is why he is the one that died for us, right? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. He gave. The sacrifice of Jesus Christ is our Creator taking the form of a man, coming here in a flesh and blood form and dying for us. Okay? So death is something that we know God has suffered. But what people generally do not understand is that all the other pains and sufferings that are experienced by anyone in this world or perhaps in any other world, God has experienced all of it, and he is suffering even to this very day. The Bible talks a great deal about the sufferings of Christ. Okay? And that, my friends, is something that people don't understand. Okay, so first of all, one of the powers that God has to have is the power of judgment. That where there is evil, he has to judge it. He can't just let it go. He can't just have people running around wild, doing all these evil things, like I told you the example of sacrificing little infants in the fires, and just sit silent. Then we will say, God, why don't you do something about it? Right? That's what people say. But yet when he does, then they say, oh, well, I can't believe in someone that, does that judges people, orders people to have capital punishment. Well, in the case of when we all will appear before the judgment seat of Christ, we will all appear before the great white throne of God when he will have his day of judgment. On that day, God is going to put himself on trial. He's always being put on trial. But he's going to put himself on trial. And it will be a fair trial. And I will tell you that no one is going to be able to convict God of any unrighteous judgments. None. Not one. Okay? So this is the faith we got to have. That God is sitting above. Okay? It's like if you're in the middle of a forest. You are surrounded by the trees that are very high. You can't look up where the sky is. You can't look, what's hidden behind the next tree. But somebody who is up above you, who has a vantage point that is different, he understands exactly where the danger lies, where there might be a rushing stream, where there might be some, animal that is crouching, ready to pounce on you. Okay, he understands that because he has a different vantage point. And that is what God is. God's vantage point is different than ours. Okay, he understands things on a much different level than we do. We only are looking at things horizontally, but he is looking down vertically and horizontally, because he is in each one of us. Therefore, his viewpoint is not just external, it is also internal. And based on his viewpoint and his laws that he has formed, he understands when a law is worthy of judgment or not, when a breaking of a law. And the Bible tells us mercy rejoices against judgment. Judgment is the very last resort. In the case of Canaan and the children and the Israelites, when they had the conquest of Canaan, those who don't know biblical history, yes, then perhaps you should study it a little bit. That there were these nations that God told the Israelites to go and dispossess and to kill all the inhabitants there. Okay? What people don't understand is they start going on, oh yeah, God is bad because he told them to do that. But what they don't understand is that God gave these people over 400 years. God talked to Abraham and he said, I'm going to judge these nations, but I'm not going to do it for 400 years plus years. So 400 years God gave them to correct course, to stop doing all the evil things they were doing. And man, like when you study the history of all the evils that they did, it is worse than any horror movie that you ever see. And what people have done to each other, including to innocent little children and infants and young, maidens and everything else, it is totally beyond belief. Okay? It is totally beyond belief. So, having done all of that, should God then have passed judgment upon them? But he patiently waited. Like I said, he waited for 400 years, yet they didn't get better. They got worse and worse and worse. And finally, the hammer falls down. Now, let's say somebody commits a murder. Do you let him go? Or do you say, okay, well, no, go ahead, correct yourself. And the person goes and commits another 10 murders. And then you say, okay, no, go ahead and correct yourself. And he goes and commits 100 murders. Do you think there will come a time when your patience will run out and you are going to judge them? If you are the judge? So, just because you pass judgment, does that make the judge evil? Or does it leave the evildoer that's evil? Okay, so people want to forgive the evil of the evildoers, yet they want to pass judgment upon the judge. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that, God, before you judge God, just wait, because you're going to get your time anyways. God's going to give you a chance to make a case, and as far as God is concerned, you will not be able to condemn him. All right, secondly, understand that you don't have the same vantage point that he does, that he is doing things which we may not fully understand. What we require is the faith to understand and believe that he who has created us, who has given me this mind to think and to understand, who has created this beautiful creation, he has an understanding which is just impossible for us to have. Therefore, one day we will know better, and one day we will understand that whatever he has done has always been righteous, because he is right. His judgments are not incorrect. And if you reject God based on your limited understanding, then in the end, it is you that are going to be sorry, not God. Thank you for listening. This is Paul Sandhu.
When I think how Jesus left heaven's glory behind, and how he came to earth to die for all mankind, I can't understand why everybody doesn't love him.